Hi, Chris here. This freebie is one on joining pieces of metal clay that have been fired and or adding fresh or dry clay to already fired pieces. One of the reasons I offer freebies like this is so that you can experience one of my courses, like as a sample. You can tell whether or not my teaching style is a match for you and your learning style. I have a page on my website, chriskramer.com, that has a lot more free information on it. It's called Metal Clay Tidbits and Tricks, and I call each post a TNT. I make reference to one or more topics all the times in these online courses. For example, if you are more of a reader than a video watcher, there is a TNT for the information in this course, and it's called Joining Fired Pieces of PMC. All the links I refer to are in the document that is included in this course. Then, to learn how to join fired pieces or add fresh clay to already fired pieces, I will give you another link to a TNT called Remaking an Existing Piece. It has similar info, but it's slated more for a slightly different purpose. All right, enough of that. Let's get started here. So often a piece does not turn out how we want it to, or it breaks at a post-fire stage. If it breaks, I would try to determine the cause, as this should not happen. In this course, I will walk you through two scenarios. In the first scenario, I work on a pendant sent to me by a student who rushed through the instructions for joining dry clay to dry clay. And at the brass brush stage, the bail came apart from the pendant. By the way, the process of joining clay is really important, and these are covered in two TNTs called Adhering PMC3 to PMC3 and Joining PMC3 Pieces Dry to Dry. The second scenario was my faux pas. I made a mistake on some items, and the result was they came out of the kiln with elements either misplaced or like totally removed. This is the first scenario pendant that came to me in two pieces. It was created by a student, as I said, who was new to silver metal clay and who did not have a kiln. So I said, ship it to me and I'll repair it. Here were my steps. I took a polishing tool on a flexible shaft and roughed up the silver surfaces where the pieces will be joined. You could also use the tip of a file or sanding paper or any tool to texturize this surface. I texturized all pieces, the bail and the pendant. The idea here was to make some micro crevices and channels and increase the surface area for the added silver molecules to go into and attach to during the sintering process. If you are locating a bail, you can determine where to put it using a device that I've called the gravity wired device, described in a TNT called Hanging Asymmetric Pieces. You can see I hung the piece that was gently pinched in this device to determine where the bail needed to go. I marked this with a pencil or maybe a fine Sharpie. When I repaired this piece, I took a scoop of PMC paste and painted it where they would join. These days I make watery paste solution, and you'll see this in the next scenario. But on this pendant to this paste, I added water and worked it to make a slurry. The idea behind this is to add a thin layer of new silver molecules to the old silver, hoping that the new silver gets into every nook and cranny of our roughed up surfaces. I did this on both pieces. Then I dried both pieces. I repeated this 4 or 5 times because numerous thin paste applications is far better than 1 or 2 heavy paste applications. When this part was finished and I could see only dry clay on the pieces where they would join, then I was able to join the pieces as if they were 2 pieces of dry clay. Here you can refer to the TNT on joining PMC3 pieces dry to dry. I added syringe, I added water to both parts, and I pressed them into place. I cleaned up the excess with a rubber finger and smoothed it with a paintbrush. I dried this, I examined it, and I wanted to make it nicer, so I added more syringe to fill in the gaps. I added more water, I smoothed, and I checked the front of the piece, and I dried it again. I fired this in a kiln, which is necessary for joining fired pieces, as in, you cannot torch fire here. I finished as usual, well, how the owner of the pendant wanted, with a rough look. Now for the second scenario, in which I added fresh, wet, and dry clay to a fired piece. I make these road trip items, and recently, instead of firing with the roads up, I put the roadside down and pressed these into alumina hydrate. Oh yeah, a TNT on alumina hydrate is in your document. Big mistake. I think what happened, despite my close attention to the process, was the tiny pieces of the stripe in the road were either pushed to the side or pushed entirely off the piece by the alumina hydrate. As you can see, there are gaps in the road stripes. So here were my steps for this. I carefully used a polishing disc on the flexible shaft to remove the road stripes that had been moved and to rough up the areas where I would be adding more road stripes. I took a discarded eyeglass lens and used it as a mixing well for making a watery paste. I decided to paint the watered down paste on the entire road so that in the end the surface would be consistent in texture and appearance. So here I am painting the watery paste on the roads. The idea, again, is to add a thin layer of new silver molecules to the old silver. I painted, then dried, painted and dried. I think I did this, 3 or 4 times, again, because more thin layers are better than 1 or 2 thick ones. Then I added the tiny pieces of road stripes that were already dry, and you can see these in the tray on the left. And in one location, I added fresh syringe to the dried piece because I felt I needed to smooth it in. Before I fired these, I took some watered down paste and went all over the areas again, FGM, which stands for good measure. Again, a fine layer of silver to hold everything in place never hurts. I fired these in the kiln, I tumbled them in still shot, I patinaed them, I polished, and I tumbled again. Yeah, I tumbled twice, and here they are, finished. If you like this freebie, you will probably enjoy and learn a lot from my other classes. The style is the same. Tons of info, tons of photos, lots of graphics, lots of resources, lots of videos, and always mistakes for that extra mile of real-life learning. So I hope to see you in another class.